Fellow Kenyans, my name is FCPA Hesbon Omolo. I'm a governance auditor. And today I want us to have a conversation about the state of our economy and whether our economy is taking the right trajectory or whether we are moving towards a cliff. There has been a lot of discontent in our country. There has been consistent protests on a myriad of issues. First, it began with the Sufuria Maandamano, which basically meant that cost of living was a challenge to the ordinary wananchi. And then that snowballed into issues of human rights protests. And now here we are. We've had the tax-related protests. And we seem to be in a cycle of protests consistently as if this nation is grinding to a halt. So I want us today to have a brief conversation about where exactly is our economy as a country and what is it that is either right or wrong, or is this all but hot air? So first and foremost, allow me to address the state of our economy from a historical perspective. Until the year 2002, it was generally agreed that the regime that existed before Kibaki was elected didn't do quite well in moving our economy forward, and we were able to stagnate in many areas. Now, fast forward to 2007, we had made a lot of progress. There was a lot of infrastructure development under the Kibaki regime, and that then escalated to the government that was called the Nusumkate that served us up to 2013. Now, the new constitution then came with the devolution, and here we are, 10 years plus. We've had 10 years of President Uhuru, and we didn't hear much of protests except for election-related protests. But over the last 2 years since President William Ruto was elected, this nation has been on one protest after the other. Now, most of the protests have been christened around the heavy taxation, and number two, the cost of living. And then now of late, there's the issue of human rights abuse and issues to do with the forced disappearance of people that are neither coming out clearly, especially related to the same protests. Now I want us to look at the state of our economy. Now back to what I stated earlier. Number one, our economy has grown and our GDP has hovered around 5%, which means that the overall wealth of Kenya has moved from $114 billion to $130 billion in a span of 2.5 years. Now, if the measure is the absolute growth of the economy, yes, our economy has grown. Now, the second indicator we look at is the Human Development Index. That is, how am I as a Kenyan growing comparative to other Kenyans, but also comparative to the global numbers. Now, Kenya has ranked itself at number 142, down from number 146 when compared globally. We still remain at number 18 in Africa, which is still not good, but globally we have moved 3 numbers downwards. What does that mean? Something positive has happened in terms of how our economy grows. Now let us look at inflation. And inflation is about the prices of commodities relative to what they were a year or so earlier. Our inflation numbers have moved from as high as almost 9% to a low of about 2.7%. Now we are at 3.8%. So generally, our economy has improved, and much as inflation still means the cost of commodities go up, but they go up by a relatively lower percentage. So there's stability around that space. So looking at those raw numbers, I think the picture you get is a good one. And then the next question is, what are the indicators of this growth? We've seen a lot of reforms in our public sector. Today, Kenya Airways is turning profits of up to 5 billion from a negative or loss-making position of 22B. Today, the price of Kenya Power shares is trading at about 13 shillings. Previously, it was at 1 shilling. Not long ago, just 2 years ago. So clearly, there are certain signs that the economy is taking the right direction. We used to buy a packet of unga at 240 shillings. We now buy it at less than 160. In other areas, it's as low as 120. Our maize production has gone up. So something has happened in the agricultural sector, and maize is a key indicator of that. Now, you'd be wondering, why would the price of maize flour move from 240 to 160? There is, of course, the fertilizer subsidy. There's also the favorable weather we've had, but clearly there's something positive, and we have forgotten the maandamano with sufurias in our heads. So that is a positive sign. If I am a farmer growing sugarcane, has there been an increase in the price I earn when I take my sugarcane to the factory? Yes, it's now 5,500 per ton. Previously it was less, and we were importing more sugar to be able to sustain our consumption in the country. We have now had all our farmers' arrears and employees' arrears settled by the government to the tune of over 117 billion Kenya shillings. I think there are signs that the presidency and the leadership of the Kenya Kwanza government is doing certain things right. But there are other areas that the regime can do much better. One is to deal with the issue of social unrest, because it undermines the economic progress the country makes. If you have a maandamano where an entire economy is shut down for a day, that means a lot. And when there's looting and destruction of private and public property, the mess is huge. So I think the key economic factors and indicators look good. The affordable housing has employed quite a number of people. There is sign that we are doing well in almost every sector of our economy. We have had the pressure and the outcry around taxes going down, because for the first time this time, there were no protests around the finance bill. But all this is still layered on public unrest. So what is it that we are not doing right? I think our politics is a problem. And when you want to fix our politics, then we must ask ourselves some untruthful or difficult conversations that we need to have as a country. Why is it that for 10 years, 20 years of leadership of this country, our protests were only centered around election results? But all of a sudden, same economic conditions, if not better, our protests are now christened around cost of living, they are christened around taxes, they are christened around human rights abuse, and yet nothing indicates, from a statistical point of view, anything different. This is why we must have a conversation as a country on how do we want to take this country forward. And to call a spade, those who want to support a change of regime must be magnanimous to wait for 2027 to effect a regime change through the ballot. Between now and then, we must allow a conducive environment for job creation, for opportunities for us to grow, to thrive. Yes, the young people may be overzealous about their plight and the challenges they face, but those challenges cannot be addressed through street protests. They must be through open dialogue, but they must also be ready to vote and elect leaders who can champion and ensure that their agenda is addressed or implemented in the subsequent leadership regime. But I've spoken to all the key indicators on what you would look at in terms of a good economy. Number one, I've mentioned the GDP has grown from 114 billion USD to 130. That speaks to proper leadership at the apex. And that has also meant that we have moved one place from being ranked number 7 in Africa to number 6. Number 2, inflation numbers have gone down. That I've explained. Today, the price of unga is much lower than it was 2 years ago without the consumption subsidy. We were queuing for petrol not long ago, hardly 2.5 years ago. We couldn't find petrol at our pump stations. Today, it is available. The price, though slightly higher than it was 2 years ago, but it's without the 55 shillings subsidy. So clearly there are certain indicators that we're doing the right things, but we must be able to have honest and truthful conversations with our people. I want to applaud the leadership of the country on what it has done from an economic point of view. But politically, I think we need to have a conversation as a country. Where do we want to take Kenya? I feel as a citizen of this country that all our economic gains are being negated by constant street protests. What is this thing that each Kenyan so much that they cannot wait for 2.5 years to vote and elect who they want? We cannot afford the level of destruction, the level of protest we're having. And for purposes of addressing the political issues, this is my message to Kenyans. Protests or picketing is allowed in law. You have a right to go to the streets and picket and even present your petition to authority. But there's a rider in that Article 37. You must be peaceable and you must not be armed. And secondly, you must notify the authorities. And when you notify them, you cannot protest everywhere. Imagine today, the whole nation of Kenya is under the Sabasaba Maandamano protest. Every single street of this city of Nairobi is a protest zone. How then do you expect the police to help keep law and order? The natural way and fair way of protesting is to say we'll start from point A to point B. You agree on a route map. Those routes then are ring-fenced with marshals and police officers. Then the rest of Kenyans are allowed to go about their businesses. That is what we must all speak to. But if you want to have a nation where every point is a protest zone, how then do you expect the 100,000 police officers to help keep law and order? It's very difficult then to even identify the rogue elements in society who would want to take advantage, because it's all over. Kenyans, wake up. Yes, you can blame the police and the leadership, but how do you want to protest in every corner of the country? You want to protest in every town, you want to protest in every corner of every town. If the entire CBD is a protest zone, how do you expect police to be in every corner of the CBD? It doesn't work that way. And that is why I feel very, very strongly that we must have a conversation on the right to protest. Yes, it is there, and it is an inalienable right that nobody can take away. But it must not be exercised in a manner that undermines the rights of others who do not want to protest. Anybody carrying stones blocking roads, you should not enjoy the protection of law, and the media should not project you as a peaceful protester. Anybody who is carrying projectiles, whether it is a stone, whether you are carrying a rungu, you have no space within Article 37. And any officer as well, ensuring law and order, should also be able to distinguish and ensure that you use reasonable force. Only when your life is threatened should a life be taken out of protest, but should never attempt to shoot any protester, whether they carry projectiles, unless you've judged that your life is going to be the alternative. That is the only time you may use reasonable force, and reasonable force would be anything that would disarm that protester, but avoid killings at whatever cost. I think that is a society we all would want to be part of. Now, having said that, allow me to then speak to the politics of the nation. The past president of this country, Honorable Mwai Kibaki, was a Catholic. The next president, Uhuru Kenyatta, was a Catholic. President William Ruto does not belong to that denomination. I know people will say the church is balanced, but there's a clear pattern that the church is aligning to the leadership, that they feel they share the same faith. We must not allow that narrative to be driven in our country. The church must remain neutral. When something is wrong, call it out. It doesn't matter whether it affects the government or the opposition. The same to the media. We have a media that is openly biased. Biased against the government and unable to call out bad behavior from amongst us as citizens. When we mobilize to go to the streets carrying projectiles, we still use the word peaceful protest in our news coverage. When the whole nation almost burnt on 25th of June with massive looting, the media was quick to blame the government. Yes, the government has a responsibility to protect the people. But where do you apportion responsibility to these citizens, especially those who call people to the streets? If I'm a civil society leader and I call out members of the public to come and join me in protest, I have a duty to also ensure that this process is executed smoothly by working very closely with the law enforcement agencies so that we have a route plan that we are able to rely on, and anything outside that space, then you help the law enforcement agencies to be able to step in. Only through then can we build a truly successful country. Otherwise, back to my key conversation today, which is about the state of our economy. I want to tell every Kenyan, wherever you are, what President William Ruto has done over the last 3 years from an economic point of view is more than what we had seen over the last 10 years prior to his leadership. And the numbers back it up. The number of affordable housing units that we have, the price of coffee has gone up because there are reforms in the coffee sector. The price of tea has gone up because of the reforms in that sector. The price of milk, which the farmers are paid whenever they sell their milk to the factories, has gone up. Sugarcane price to the farmer has gone up. Every economic indicator is looking up. What may be looking down in all this construct is our political environment, which is scaring away investors. Even the Nairobi Securities Exchange, the value has gone up tremendously. I've mentioned the shares of major entities that drive our economy. Kenya Power, that gives us energy. Our national carrier, Kenya Airways, are all now back to profitability in the last 2 years. It's not by rocket science. It's leadership. So when you attack the leadership of the current president, let's also be fair. Where they've done wrong, we point out. And I've mentioned politically, there are things to be fixed. In terms of matters of human rights, we need to reorientate some of our police officers to do the right things. Where we have failed, I think that needs to be acknowledged. In terms of the fight against corruption, a little bit more needs to be done, because it's not enough to hear corruption cases here and there, but comparatively, there is less to talk about compared to the previous regimes. Of course, that's not a good yardstick, but I think we can do more. And therefore, reforming our public institutions is very, very key towards strengthening our governance and fighting corruption. I expect and look forward to a stronger oversight of public resources by both the legislative arm and even the judiciary, where cases for arbitration or cases for corruption end up in court. And therefore, my plea to all Kenyans, let us all support a leadership that is able to deliver. But let's not forget that every 5 years, we have an opportunity to exert regime change if we feel dissatisfied. Anything in between is too costly to the economy. Imagine how much losses we've incurred in terms of business opportunities gone, in terms of damages to public infrastructure, in terms of lost lives. If all this could be spared through a manner in which we can protest without damaging our economy, then we'd be having our economy growing even at a faster pace. We can do all this together. So I call upon all Kenyans to be patriotic enough to love their country, even if you don't love the leadership. Do not destroy your nation. And I also call upon the media, be very objective, because you are not objective. And I dare say to the media, you need to be objective. You can read through some of the comments. And also to call upon the government, let's also be open, let's accept criticism. But a balanced coverage from the media would give us a fair nation. a biased coverage could burn this country the way Rwanda burnt in 1994, when the media was totally biased, and by the end of it all, many, many lives were lost in that country. The media can burn the country, but the media can also help heal the nation. When you hear leaders invoking the flames of 2007, it's a dangerous sign. And for any media house to air it because there's freedom of expression and reporting, no. The media must also censure what is it that can incite a nation into anarchy. We only have one Kenya. And therefore, all of us must have what we call self-introspection. I need to introspect as a Kenyan. I expect all other Kenyans to do the same. Those in charge of leadership of this country must also step back and ask themselves, are there instances where we've stepped out of bounds, and can we do things differently so that we all work in the best interest of our country? But also let all other non-state actors to also carry out their work diligently. Let's not hide things, because our democracy is so important. It is the reason why we are the leading economy in this part of the world. We must protect it by protecting rights, but also by being responsible for the good of our nation. Thank you.